Right. I think we're ready to go.
Hey, is there a link to the YouTube live that you're sending out?
What?
Is there a link to the YouTube live?
Yeah.
I'm gonna drop it in the chat box. Is there a link to the YouTube? Oh, hey, look who clicked on the link to the YouTube live.
I always do that at the beginning because when you start live streaming it, it starts playing back unmuted, and then it just becomes this like circle void of the recording of people saying the same thing over and over again for like 2 minutes till you fix it.
Yeah, and wait until I switch over to my iPhone and I'm kind of a Luddite, so there'll be a lot of that great feedback going on. Oh, hey, did you want me to just jump in? Did you have like something that you wanted to say?
Oh, I mean, sure. Sorry, I got so caught up with just like talking. I forgot this is like a formal thing. Yeah, so hi everyone. I'm Sam from Da Vinci Art Alliance. This month is April, which is when we celebrate the Everyday Futures Fest at DVAA and with all of our partnering organizations around the city. Billy runs RAIR, who is one of our partnering organizations. And today we're going to do a virtual walkthrough of their facilities that if you apply to their residency program, you may also have access to. So thank you, Billy, for everything.
Hey, word. So hey everybody, my name is Billy Dufala. I am the co-founder and director of artist residencies at RAIR, Recycled Artists in Residency. I'm just gonna this is gonna be, stay tuned for an hour or so because there's a lot to cover. This can be informal. If we get to a certain point, once I'm out in the yard, you can ask questions. I kind of have my tour will just go over a lot of the ins and outs of the recycling center itself and sprinkle it with little bits and pieces of our artistic gesture and the program and how we run it and why it's meaningful and important to be doing the work that we're doing. But just to kind of give you a little bit of backstory about myself, I'm a sculptor. I'm an artist. I have a collaborative practice with my brother. We're known as the Dufala Brothers. We've been in Philly for like 20 years doing work. We show with Fleischer Ullman Gallery downtown. And I teach at PAFA. I co-founded this big sculpture cooperative in West Philly years ago with a bunch of friends called Traction Company. My entry point into this waste stream, I'll refer to the waste stream a lot throughout the tour, really was a thing that was economically motivated. But to kind of go backwards in time, as an artist, even when I was a student, I didn't have a lot of money, so I was always interested in alternate economies and ways of sourcing materials and creative or through the backdoor type ways. I over the years became friends with salvage company folks or scrappers or people who were already kind of in business to be rerouting materials and the folks you want to know if you don't want to go to Home Depot to buy that thing that you can't buy at Home Depot. So I've been shown to the gate at many scrap yards. There's this kind of the recycling industry is kind of historically closed door to artists because artists sometimes come with this this stigma where like if you're outside of your element and going into a busy recycling center, you can get in the way, you can cause trouble, somebody can get hurt, you slow down the operations. It's kind of what makes our program really unique is that we are a liaison between an artist studio and the rest of the facility. But to go back, I was a materials guy. People would come to me if they were looking for something. And I sometimes was successful at finding things for people because I had a network of all these folks who were kind of dealing with waste in one way, shape, or form, or salvage or scrap. I had a studio mate who was looking for skyscraper glass or architectural glass. And I reached out to a friend who told me to come up to Revolution Recovery, which is our host recycling company who hosts RAIR. And at the time, this is like 2009. I didn't even know about Revolution Recovery. They were a very new, business. And so at that time, the Comcast building, the skyscraper down in Center City, was under construction. Revolution Recovery was receiving a lot of that new construction waste. So I got the tip. Me and my studio mate, we came up here. We drove right through the gate, at which point my brain was exploding because of the access. We drove right onto the tipping floor, which is we'll see the tipping floor. We'll explain more about that later. And we met the foreman, and he's like, "Hey, you were the artists here for the glass?" And we're like, "Yeah." And they ended up giving us like $25,000 worth of glass for like $200, and brains exploding, being like, "Oh my God, this is amazing. Who are the owners here?" And he's like, "Oh, it's this guy over here." And here comes one of the original founder of the business, a gentleman by the name of Avi Golan, who's now a dear friend. Um, and I'm like, "Hey, you're the owner. How old are you?" And he's like, "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" And I was just like, "Yeah, can I bring my students here?" He's like, "Nah, you can't do that." I was like, "Hey, man, this is an amazing place. It's an awesome resource. Can I get your business card?" So he gave me his business card. I went back home, got on the computer. I sent him an email with a link to like Meryl Louderman Euclides. For those of you on this tour who don't know who Meryl Louderman Euclides is, um, a hero of mine. She was the artist in residence at the New York Department of Sanitation for over 30 years. Super important figure in the art world, but also in dealing with waste and maintenance. She wrote the Maintenance Art Manifesto. We can talk more about her later too. We did a project, and she's a big fan of RAIR, a huge supporter. I sent him a link to Meryl's work. I sent him a link to this program called Recology. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Recology, it's a program in the Bay Area. It's been around for about 30 years. It's a residency program inside of a transfer station. Very different because they deal with municipal waste. But for us, have been a huge supporter since day one. We've mirrored a lot of how they work in order to get our program up and running, and they've been endlessly supportive from the very beginning. So I sent these links to the owner, Avi, and knowing that like you don't need an arts background to appreciate this and what it is if you're in the waste industry. And he took the bait, and he immediately got back to me. He's like, "Hey, this stuff is really cool. Let's stay in touch." And I informally came up and visited, and I noticed that they were informally sourcing material for furniture maker friends of them. And they had this creative edge to the work that they do. And they're kind of outside the box thinking entrepreneurial business guys. And I think what they saw in the very early days was an artist residency or an artist organization dovetailing with their for-profit privately owned recycling facility. They saw value in it as an educational tool. And that I think was like immediately one of the things that allowed them to entertain a conversation with me. So we became friends. Meanwhile, in the early days, the owners of Revolution Recovery, they would do lectures at sustainable design programs in the region. And this is all still like 2009. At that time, my colleague and co-founder and good friend Fern Gukin was getting her master's in sustainable design at Philadelphia University. And she had done a project with an artist who had done the Recology program the year prior. So when she saw the owners of Revolution Recovery talk about their business model, and she read into that kind of creative edge as well, she thought, "Hey, it's my thesis year. Maybe I'll pitch starting an artist resource at their facility." And when she pitched it to him, they're like, "Oh, hey, we know this crazy dude, Billy. He says he's an artist. You should talk to him. He might be helpful for you in your thesis." So me and Fern got together and immediately hit it off. And when Fern graduated, I helped Fern with her thesis. And when she graduated, she was picked up by Revolution Recovery and started working for the company with the understanding that she had kind of the carte blanche on how to take her thesis and begin to develop it. So it became a living thesis. And it was up to me and Fern on how we wanted to do that. But I had dreamt about RAIR before we even knew it was called RAIR. I had dreamt about starting this type of program in a city like Philadelphia for years and years and years. So I held on tight to make sure that we were making it so it could actually be fully fledged out and become a real nonprofit and do the work that we do. So that's kind of the backstory on it. That's how it was really stroke of luck in a lot of ways, but also in some capacity, it's like showing up. And I should say that once Fern got involved and we started doing, she started working for Revolution Recovery, there was a big gap. There was like a 3 or 4 year gap between when we actually officially started doing our open call. And it was really about piloting the program and proof of concept. It took years for me to like understand how to safely navigate in a very busy, active industrial recycling facility, how to safely go through this facility and create valuable opportunity for artists to pool materials and to think expansively about how to use this site and the materials to make work, but also to, you know, educate. Our mission is to challenge perception of waste culture by creating this platform for artists at the intersection of art and industry, which is kind of what we still refer to this as. It's an art and industry collaboration. If it wasn't for the buy-in from the host company, we wouldn't have ever gotten as far as we have. So on that note, I'm going to do a little bit of shifting into Mobile Billy, so we can get into the tour. But maybe this is a perfect opportunity to say, hey, that's the OG origin story. Does anybody have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but that is really cool to hear all that. Thanks, Billy.
Yeah, you know, and then, you know, there's a lot about like, you know, showing up and just keep showing up. You can kind of will these things into reality if you keep showing up for work, right? All right, so this is going to get weird for a second. Pardon my feedback. Can everybody hear me? Awesome. So right now I'm coming through the Revolution Recovery offices. This is in Philadelphia. This is Revolution Recovery's flagship operation. This is where they started. They have 2 other facilities, one in Newcastle, Delaware, and one in Allentown. But here in Philadelphia, this is where all of their offices are, all of their dispatch, sales, accounting, you know, offices for special projects, all that stuff. So this is where all of their office staff is. And in the other locations, it's all just operations. But right behind me, that's the scale house. Talk more about that in a minute. And I apologize ahead of time. When I'm outside, I tend to scream a lot. So you might want to turn the, only because it can get really noisy. So yeah, y'all got the origin story. I'm just gonna start by saying, welcome to Revolution Recovery. Right behind me, it might be hard to see, but I'm gonna stand here for a minute and hopefully we see a truck come in and then I'll follow it. But basically, Revolution Recovery is construction and demolition waste. This has nothing to do with your curbside municipal collection services. This is not cans and bottles and milk jugs and cardboard boxes. This is all big construction, demolition, manufacturing. They bring in about 500 tons a day on average. They divert 50% of that material from landfill. That other 50% they recover. And what they do is they sort it by material, aggregate it,
and then we'll sell those materials in the recycling market. We can call it the commodities market. We can call it a bunch of different things, but for the sake of our tour, let's just call it the commodities market. So all day long, trucks will come in, they'll jump on that scale, and that scale house, they'll take a number, which is their weight. They scale in, they drive all the way to the back, they tip their dumpster, all the contents comes out of the dumpster onto the tipping floor. They drive back and they scale out, they get the weight once they've tipped, so they know how much they actually got rid of, and then they're charged by the ton for the amount of material that they tipped on the tipping floor. So to kind of review that, Revolution Recovery is getting paid to take these materials all day long, and then they sort what they can recover, and then they sell it on the commodities market. Now, there's a lot of, that's really like, the owners would hate me for simplifying it. It's much more complicated than that, but that's kind of the general run of show. All the dumpsters that are coming here are from a bunch of different haulers. There's a bunch of hauling companies in Philadelphia. So you might, if you see a construction site, you might see a dumpster that says Tri-State or Durazio or this and that and blah, blah, blah. And all of those companies are just simply contracting with big developers and construction outfits, putting their dumpsters on the site, filling it up with materials, and then bringing it to a recycling center or a transfer station. 9 times out of 10, well, I don't want to say, sorry, I didn't mean 9 times out of 10. What we want to see is these construction outfits and these developers sending it to a place like Revolution Recovery, where that material can be sorted and the material that's worth something can be recovered and then sold on the commodities market, so it's not being buried in landfill. There's 4 different places in the city where you can go. Revolution Recovery is the best. I just had to plug it because they're my homies. And they're also conveniently located right off 95, which is kind of a strategic thing, but we don't have to get into the weeds with that. All day long, these dumpsters are coming in, they're going to the back, they're tipping. They're coming from all around Philadelphia and the suburbs. When these guys first started, just to kind of give you an idea, perspective of how they built, they were hand sorting 1 dumpster at a time, just 2 people, and then it was 3 people. If you go all the way back to the very beginning, when the origins of the company, they were literally stuffing a Volvo full of drywall and driving it to an abandoned lot and aggregating it over the course of the week, and then going to a company that would recycle drywall and then doing it all over again. To kind of give you perspective on it, like going back to that creative edge that I noticed when I first visited, these guys would like try to innovate. For the first several years, well, I'll say probably the first like 7 or 8 years, there was a market that supported the work they were doing. And we'll get back to this later, but in 2014, 2015, there was a crash in the commodities market where all materials really kind of hit, let's just say they were in the gutter. And this is a very complicated thing to assess and understand how to explain. Even economists can't really tell you succinctly exactly why, but this place, it's my job to impress upon people that is much more complicated than just like a pile of wood and trash being dumped. It's my job to kind of illustrate over a longer arc in time how you can tease out globalism, or how things that are happening in China's economy are going to impact the way materials are being dealt with on the tipping floor here, and how they're sorting and how they're stockpiling and what they're burying in landfill. And then when the market returns, how they're aggregating that and selling it because there's more value in it because the market's changed. So right behind me, we have, oh, hey, really quick. This is a roll-off truck, and that is a dumpster. And that truck is going to go to the tipping floor, and they're going to tip. And that's just part of that scaling in, scaling out process that I was talking about. See this guy right here? He's taking dimensional lumber, which is by volume the largest material that comes through here, and he's sprinkling it out in this big area. And then workers will come in and pull out all the plastic and contaminants that are not dimensional lumber, and then they're going to chip all that wood. And we're going to hang out and talk about wood for a second. So dimensional lumber is an interesting one. When I do tours with like students and stuff, I point at this pile. I'm going to get up a little closer. I point at this pile and I'm like, hey, look at that. How many trees does that pile of wood? Thinking about anything that's made out of wood used to be a tree. How much of Fairmount Park was that? Just kidding. Not really. But the point being, is showing up every single day. And like I said, by volume, it's the largest material that comes in, but it doesn't really have a value. They'll get paid to take it, but they chip it, and that's how they get rid of it without having to pay to get rid of it. Going back to that 500-ton average that I say, they divert 50% from landfill, but every time they send a trailer of landfill to the landfill, they have to pay for it. So for them, if they can bring in a material and get paid for it, they want to get, if they can't recover it and sell it, they want to get it out of here at no cost or at as low a cost as possible, or for a profit. With wood, unfortunately, it's not very valuable, so they're not going to turn a profit getting it back out after they've gotten paid. So what they do is they chip it, and they have a partnership with a company that turns it into mulch. They'll send their trucks in here, they'll fill it, and they'll get it out of here at no cost. Now, that's a real simplified way of just explaining to you how that bottom line is maintained. They are not paying to get rid of it. All the material that's not going to be recovered, they have to pay to send it to landfill. But that 50-50 recovery rate is really good before the crash of the commodities market. And let's just say and I'll get into this later, they used to do an 80-20, recovering 80% of their waste stream. But simply after the crash of the commodities market, there's no market to support it. So what they had to do was, I'd like to talk about the dimensional lumber as a form of resilience in the marketplace. It was really difficult, and all scrappers and all waste companies, they really they were hard up when that crash of the commodities market happened. People not taking a salary for over a year. They were stockpiling all their aluminum, and with their, yo, what's up, Ahmed? He's my homie. He's amazing. So with the dimensional lumber, they stopped the contract with the company that turns it into mulch, and they started leaving their lumber on their sort line and mixing it with their residual waste, and then churning it out and figuring out how to slowly develop into a biofuel that was being not sold, but gotten rid of at no cost to a waste to energy facility. So
Billy,
rather than, yes.
I got a question.
Yes.
So for the artists in residence, you got maybe a wannabe Louise Nevelson who wants interesting wood pieces and has no use for chips or wood bark or whatever. Can those artists in residence get at the wood that is behind you on one side, or is it just all going to be decimated?
It's all grabbable. And I was going to get to that. So, I mean, this is really just to kind of color the complexity and the context in which we work. Yes, this is all available as long as you get to it before it goes into the chipper. And the way that RAIR works is we are intervening before it then goes downstream. And downstream, I mean, this material, everything that comes in here, upstream is where it's coming from, downstream is where it's going after it's been sorted here. So all this lumber, that's up for grabs, and we use it all the time. I do not buy 2x6s. I do not buy 2x4s. I try not to buy 2x12s, and even for plywood, I don't buy plywood anymore, because if you're hanging out in the yard, you will find it eventually because of the glut and the excess in the amount of waste that is in the C&D waste stream. A C&D waste stream, I forgot to say, construction and demolition waste, C&D waste stream. It's all there. This is a constant, by volume, always showing up. So back to my story with the dimensional lumber, they were making this biofuel, and they eventually got it worked out to where they had it. So they were getting it out of here at no cost, but they were also getting rid of some of that residual waste that they used to have to landfill. So for them, it was a boon. But we don't have to get into waste to energy right now. We know that incinerators are problematic because of how they are, strategically located around communities of color, and absolutely cause cancer and are problems in tight-knit communities where this is a toxic situation that we have to deal with moving forward. Everybody thought waste to energy was going to solve all our problems. That is simply not the case. But To illustrate my point, for about 3 years, they were manufacturing a biofuel, which helped their recovery rate, helped them with the dimensional lumber, helped them when the market wasn't there to support them. But that waste to energy plant went out of business, came back online running on natural gas. They had to reset. Now they're chipping that wood. They no longer manufacture a biofuel, and now they're chipping it back with that old contract, and it's getting turned into mulch. Now, the reason I took the time to illustrate that is it's my job as a liaison to illustrate this longer arc and try to explain how things that happen with China's economy impact what's happening here. This place might look similar. The price of gas can make this place look different. How they operate, how they behave, how they move material. All of these things are not exclusive to Philadelphia. It's really connected well beyond our region, but it's just all coming from this region because of redevelopment and because of construction. But that was just an example of how this place becomes much more complicated than just material getting tipped and us grabbing it. It ties into a myriad topics and disciplines and sectors. And for an artist program, we're really excited about artists who are coming at us with questions that we don't know the answers to, but because we're within the industry, we can go and find those answers. And I mean to illustrate this with that statement. When you're an artist, and I've experienced this so many times, you show up at a junkyard and you're like, hey, I'm an artist. I want to get in there and grab that stuff. And they're like, yeah, sorry, we don't have the time to facilitate that. Or if you're calling up a bailing company, you're like, hi, I'm an artist. I'm working on this project. They don't care. They want you to buy a baler. So they're just like, yeah, sorry, we don't deal with artists, click. Or if you want to collaborate with a demolition company because you're doing a project that requires really a sensitive and nuanced approach to deconstructing a home. As an individual artist, it's hard to get somebody to take you seriously. So here we have the owner of the company, and since we're inside of the industry, if I want to get at the head of sales at a bailing company, I can have the owner make the introduction and affiliated with his business. Now that head of sales at that bailing company is going to take me seriously, give me the time of day, and have a thoughtful and meaningful conversation rather than just blowing me off because I'm an artist, or maybe they think I'm an investigative reporter because I'm asking a bunch of questions that doesn't really pertain to what they're in business for. That I call the referral system. It's also a great way of understanding how to access information. So for us, on a case-by-case basis, all these projects cumulatively over time have built out the toolbox and our knowledge base for how we conduct ourselves and leverage the context in which we work. So it's one of those things. I went back to when we were talking about Jesse in the early part of this tour. We want to be able to not just make art with a capital A, but support interdisciplinary work in a way where it's like artists are interested in these bigger, larger, looming topics about climate injustice and supply chains and the terminology and how it's interesting that there's an opacity to how you refer to these things. And it seems like by design, these things are kind of invisible unless you're within the industry. And as a liaison between the art studio and the industry, we're the ones that oftentimes have the ability or the tenacity or just the wherewithal to get those answers to those questions or create those conversations or put people in contact with one another so you can kind of dig deeper than just doing a Google search and cold calling somebody. Just some of the interesting latitude that our program offers artists with a wide variety, not just materials based, because it gets more complicated than that. But, like always, if you want to be a Louise Nevelson, we got tons of wood for you. So behind me is the sort line. We are in warehouse 2. All the material that is going to be recovered gets sorted up here. You can see these yellow, let's just point out them. These yellow rectilinear forms, they are the tops of the bays that correspond with these material bays. So right here, there's a guy when the line is running, and he is hand sorting what looks like to be cardboard right here and steel right here. So all day long, there's a conveyor belt in between this bay up like elevated, and all that material. So here, let me just All that material comes across that line, and they're sorting it and dropping in these bays. And when that bay fills up, a front end loader will come in, it'll grab all that material. And if it's aluminum, they'll put it in this aluminum pile, which will be hand sorted and then thrown into the baler over there, and then come out in these bales like this. So this is a really dirty sort. This is the very beginning of diverting material from landfill and putting it back into the world as a material that will be turned into something new again. So it's like, and let's just take a closer look. Like these aluminum bales right here, there's like tons of different alloys and garbage mixed in there, but they'll sell them to like a smelter in Camden, and then they'll sort that and smelt that and turn it into aluminum ingot or something else. So that might show up as a bike frame, or the drill, like an aluminum can. You see the advertising about like incentivizing recycling, but on an industrial scale, that's what it looks like. And that will be sold. But going back just to kind of, illustrate how this place is always changing. In 2015, when they stopped selling their aluminum because the market crashed, they just stockpiled. They didn't sell their aluminum for like 4 years. Their facility in Delaware, Newcastle, they have a lot of space. Here in Philly, it's a really small campus. They just sent all their aluminum bales down to Delaware, and they stockpiled it there until the market returned. And then once they could get a good price, they started selling it again. Just in a weird way, that also kind of is an indicator of how revolution recovery then becomes, at least in a localized way, an influence in the marketplace. Because if the price goes up and then they're like sell, they just flood the market with like $2.5 million worth of scrap aluminum. That kind of stuff, it might seem real nerdy and just like inconsequential, but it has real impact. And that's the kind of stuff that's like really interesting, that we can have those conversations with artists who are interested. So I'm going to get into, before I get into the artist residency and all of that, we also, along working with these artists on a case-by-case basis through the open call, we also do special projects. And I'll say it like this. I explained how we've built out our knowledge base and our toolbox by working on these artist projects. Now, over the past 7 years, there are conversations that we have with, artists all along the way, but nobody's proposal necessarily gets at some of these themes that cumulatively build up over time. And as an organization, we want to do something about it. So there's always been this kind of conversation around as art object as artifact, or discarded object as trash as artifact, and themes around anthropological methods of or contemporary archaeology. All of these themes, there's certain artists who work at the intersection of contemporary art practices and anthropology, but instead of asking somebody like Mark Dion to come and do a project at RAIR, we thought it'd be interesting to ask actual scholars to come here and understand, can we facilitate the same way we do for artists for scholarly research? Now, stay with me, because it gets a little long-winded and it sounds like it might be mission drifting, but the answer was, well, yes, we can. We didn't know at the time when we started leaning into it, but there's this entire burgeoning subsect of the social sciences called discard studies. And that is just like people studying anything from space trash to human trafficking, but using the discard of that process or of that phenomenon as a way to understand it more succinctly in contemporary times. And thinking about archaeology, like we understand ancient civilizations by studying their garbage that was left behind. So it kind of made sense to lean in that direction. And we had a fine arts curator on the project to do studio visits with them, all the while to kind of understand how, as an organization, we can keep our eyes out for a more interdisciplinary approach to programming and facilitating for artists moving forward. And we still work with one of the archaeologists that was part of that program. And we were also still really close in touch with one of the anthropologists, who was the anthropologist in residence at the New York Department of Sanitation. Weird, kind of seemingly like tangential or like ancillary in its actuality, but really to the core of what we do as a program, very important and very engaging for us. Yeah, discards is the bomb. I hear you. So to the part about why you're on this tour, maybe, it's the art. So this is the tipping floor. And I'm gonna hang out here and maybe we'll get to see a dumpster dump, maybe we won't. Right here, this is the landfill pile. And then beyond there, that's the recovery pile. But this is where we hang out if you are applying to the program and you're awarded a residency. This is where you get materials. Now, there's never artists in the yard during operating hours on their own because Saturday mornings are kind of a little more mellow, but you see these machines. By day, when it's busy, there's 3 of those front end loaders zipping around, moving waste. There's 4 of those excavators loading trailers and moving other material. So it becomes a very dangerous site. So there's always RAIR staff working with artists during operating hours, but we post up here and we pull materials as they come out of the dumpster because once that pile of material that came out of a dumpster gets pushed, if there was something that an artist wanted, it's more likely that it's going to get mushed and minced and mangled and destroyed the more it gets pushed. So what we do is we wait for a truck like this to show up, and we're already posted up out here waiting for it to tip. Now, our MO is to not interrupt the flow of operations. It's kind of funny because we always will, because if we weren't looking at this dumpster and what was inside of it would just push it either into the recovery pile or into the landfill pile. So thankfully, we have a visitor who we can illustrate this with. Going back to that 500-ton average and it consisting of construction, demolition, and manufacturing waste, it's also important to say that every single day, folks like this show up. And this isn't construction and demolition waste. This is home cleanouts. Think about eviction. Think about somebody who passes away and, the family just doesn't want to deal with it, or they don't live in the area and they just got to get rid of it all. Or it's a garage clean out. Or it's like a home renovation and it's not a big construction outfit. That type of waste does come in every single day. Now, for the domestic stuff that's coming out of a home, it's not necessarily a recoverable material. And the reason is, a lot of times, the materiality of what's in these loads is too complex to be able to hand sort on the sorting line and reduce it to the materials that we're going to recover and sell on the commodities market. But here, let's just watch. That's all that. So let's pretend we're an artist. Okay, what we got in here? Oh, we got that nice little nightstand. Oh, it's broken. What else do we got? We got this guy over here. He's trying to kill me. See that? Safety first. We do, if you're an artist in residence, we're gonna come around. Thanks, man. We're gonna walk around, see what we got. Oh, hey, that's a really nice enamel table. Got a nice birdhouse. See what we got. Oh, hey, nice radio flyer. What's going on? So that's how we do. And if we want this radio flyer, we just pull it out. I'm not going to pull it out because I'm holding the selfie stick, but that's how we do it. So this material, we'll pull it, we'll get it to the side over there. And then at lunch, once we've aggregated a bunch of our choice materials, we'll get a forklift and a hopper and we'll bring it back to the studio up at the front of the property, which we will end the tour there and we can have more questions once we do that. So that's kind of a standard residency. That's probably the flagship program that we offer is 4 to 6 weeks, scheduling hours to pick, pulling those materials, getting them back to the studio, and you got 4 to 6 weeks uninterrupted time to focus on your work, modest woodworking equipment, hand tools, all those things. We take care of all that, and then you're like safe, plugged away in the studio, not dealing with the hustle bustle of the tipping floor, making your work. And then beyond that, if you want to take all that work with you and show it at a museum or a gallery, that's fine. We can also, at the beginning of orientation, we try to understand what an artist wants to work towards. So we don't officially, or let's say we don't formally do exhibitions, but if an artist wants to do an open studio, we can do that. If they want to do a proper exhibition, months ahead of their time in residence, we can reach out to the network of institutions and organizations that we've known over the years and try to set up some sort of situation where we can work towards an exhibition for the work that they create here. But it's not like, it's not standard fare. It's all case by case. We don't do more than one artist at a time, and we only do 5 to 6, sometimes 7, but usually 5 to 6 artists a year, and we don't overlap them. We find that our focus, the services we provide are best when we just focus on one project at a time. And I've already described how we benefit and mutually benefit from that process. So that's kind of how the standard residency works. The other track of residency that we offer is called the Biggie Shorty. And the Biggie Shorty, near and dear to my heart. So as an artist, I do a lot of, I've done a lot of big sculpture and installation with my brother over the years. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. I should just stay focused, but I just wanted to see what kind of painting that was. Doing big sculpture and installation can be difficult. There's a logistics end to that becomes a lot of weight to carry on. People don't really think about what happens after you do a production. This is really kind of what inspired some of the ethos of this organization. Is a lot of production, not just an individual artist project, but think about theater, think about museums, thinking about construction, all this material. It's post-production. At the end of a big exhibit, let's say like the ICA or the PMA, they're gonna try and recoup what they can, but for everything else, they get a dumpster, they throw it in the dumpster and hopefully send it to a place like Revolution Recovery. For artists, it's a similar thing. I know I don't get work done if it's not on a deadline, but a lot of times people aren't thinking about what happens after the show or after the production. So the Biggie Shorty is this way of kind of consolidating some of these logistics where you're working towards a document of the work. You're not necessarily making a museum ready or gallery ready body of work. You're working after hours and on weekends when the site is not in operation. You're still pulling materials and you're still using the waste stream, but it's more about creatively co-opting the site, the piles, the warehouse, using some of this equipment because I can, safely have been trained and I can operate all this equipment. How to really explore the expansive context of the site itself for the work. And then that work will be staged, photographed, performed, videotaped, turned into a short film. And then at the end of that, once there's a document of the work, all of the material that you use to make that production goes back into the waste stream. Now, that's not mandatory, but it is one of those things that allows you or impresses upon a practitioner the idea of front to back, beginning to end, the cycle at which we need to be thinking about our material footprint and how we work and how we put all those parts on the chopping block from the beginning. And a lot of times it's creating more runway. So for the Biggie Shorties, we're in conversation as soon as you're accepted into the program, trying to lay the groundwork and understand the parameters in which that proposal wants to be in. And then we set that up. So well in advance, we're thinking about the culminating of this work. Sometimes we don't get that far and it's really more about experimental work. We do encourage failure. This is a place where you can come to try things that you might not be able to within the context of your studio. But the cool thing about a Biggie Shorty is it really gives you the latitude and the freedom to think big. I become your ad hoc project manager, and then we work together to fulfill those aspirations and make them become a reality. And at the end, you're already in a recycling center. Oh my God, it is dusty. You're already in a recycling center. So that responsible way of dealing with that waste is built into it. But the whole time, it's impressing upon you the footprint. We used to joke about the Biggie Shorty being like a zero carbon footprint project. And in a way, it kind of is, but not always. It's just a really more malleable way that becomes a big challenge for those who want to take that challenge. And historically speaking, not a lot of people apply to the Biggie Shorty program, even though we still advertise it and we still accept people into that track of residency. It's a personal favorite of mine, near and dear to my heart. And that's how I piloted this program in the early days. They were more in the context of these interventions that work towards a document that don't have to be crated, they don't have to be shipped, they don't have to be stored. It's a way of kind of taking all of that out of the equation and really getting to the content and concepts of what that work is getting after without having to deal with the logistical nightmare that sometimes those works demand. So that's a long-winded way of saying there are the two different programs that we offer. I told you about the special projects, and now I'm going to cut through the warehouse and get to the other side of the property and talk about a whole other wild and crazy thing. But I also say, perhaps this is a good time for me to stop talking, take a sip of water, and see if anybody has any questions. So anybody got any questions?
I know that you mentioned in passing what equipment is available for manipulating the stuff that we pick out. If we were to pick stuff out of the piles. Can you actually say what you have there? I mean, you said a little bit of woodworking tools. Do you have anything that can bend metal? Do you have?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we don't have welding facilities in the studio. And what we do, if you're looking to bend metal, I'm sure we can bend metal in the studio, but we don't have a metal shop.
Okay.
Kind of what, excuse me, what we do, sorry, I'm trying to find a place to post up and, okay, there we go. What we do is the mechanics barn set up for all the welding they do for the maintenance of the trucks and the equipment. So we'll just schedule time after hours and or on the weekend and get you set up in there so we can melt metal. If it's like, it depends on like what you mean by bending metal. If it's throwing it in a vise and just like, or a pipe bender, yeah, we got that stuff. It's all like in the actual shop, it has your standard table saw, band saw, miter saw, a lot of hand tools like portaband, pneumatic air brads, pin nailers, angle grinders, all your consumables. We always have come stocked with all your screws and bolts and fasteners and hardware and consumables. But a lot of times, it's funny, we're like, it's not maybe like 50-50. We're using a lot of duct tape and zip ties and ratchet straps, kind of just because, like, if you're trying to make like fine cabinetry, this is not your spot, right? It's kind of knowing the context in which you work. Like, we have had people who get super OCD and like very detailed, like nuanced, small crafted type projects. And they're doing that in the studio and we're able to facilitate for them. And I'm not saying this as a way to discourage any form or any particular practice, but just kind of the color, the opportunity and what it actually benefits from or benefits practices. The welding can be whatever it needs to be as long as that application was accepted on the merit and how it takes advantage of working in a site like this. And I say that more to emphasize it's not just access to materials that makes a good application. And we can talk more about the jury process and what makes a competitive application more after I get through this, or we could break into it right now if anybody else had questions about what that is. Yeah. Should we, I mean, I don't see your name, but I see you on the screen, and I'll just be like, hey, should we just talk more about like applications and the merit and like, so, okay, I'm just going to do it. Right. So we always have a jury. The jury is comprised of artists, art professionals, former artists in residence, or curators, or organizational heads, people that have either had worked closely or worked on projects that were affiliated or in partnership with RAIR. So everybody who's been ever asked to be a juror has been on location, understands the context in which we work, and is familiar with at least an artist or more than one artist that has done a residency here. So their opinion about things is informed, but they come from the arts, with an arts background. We, for the most part, we're not asking like anthropologists to jury our panels ever. Like that's not our thing. We understand it's an artist residency program, but first and foremost, it's based on merit. It's the work samples. Like anybody who's ever been part of a jury panel or been in a room when these types of decisions are being made, you're going through dozens and dozens of applications, and you're always waiting for that image or that work sample that like stops the whole panel and lets them focus in and have generate conversation around it. So it's like, it's based on merit and the quality of the documentation of the work and the practice, but it's also equally as important about its proposal. And if that proposal, takes advantage of what we offer as an organization and how it benefits the artist in a meaningful way. Like if for instance, an artist who can facilitate the work that they're after by just going out on trash night and pulling whatever material from curbside trash, that's not going to be a competitive application, and the jury will be able to see that, and I will be able to see that. And when it gets down to like, when you're what is the expression? When you're splitting hairs on like how to narrow down the applicant pool, these things really, really matter. If you're coming here because you're like, oh, I like free materials, that's a super big no-no, because there's like the idea of free is like super problematic in a place because all of this material might be waste, but there's still a multitude of value, and free is just a terrible word. So like people who are like, oh, this is like I want access to all the free materials. You're like, yeah, sorry, learn how to talk about it a little bit more eloquently kind of thing. Not to be snobby or like pretentious, but like really for the work that we do and the opportunities we want to create, we want somebody who's going to be able to move beyond that base understanding and understand how they're situating themselves within the context we make available in a meaningful and generative way. So merit, proposal, and then unfortunately, luck of the draw, because that's how it is. It's like, we only take 6 artists a year, 5 to 6 artists a year, sometimes 7. Out of like 200 applications. So I forget what that breaks down to in a percentile, but it's like, it's very, very competitive. So that's the jury process. And every year we make a wait list. And if somebody that was selected can't come in for one reason or another, that wait list gets notified. And usually we don't ever have to go to the wait list. And during COVID, we did. But for the most part, people who are applying to this program want to make themselves available make themselves flexible enough to be able to take advantage of whatever time frame we're putting forth, because we work one artist at a time, and we only really operate from March to November. The winter here is brutal, and we don't have heating in the studio, so it's around 40 degrees in the winter months. We look to a future where like we are able to do programs or projects year round, but we're just simply not big enough of an organization to be doing that at this point. So that's kind of the lay of the land when it comes to applications and stuff. But if anybody else had any questions about that, let's take a minute to answer.
I don't have a question about that, Billy. As a member of Da Vinci Art Alliance and as an advocate for sustainability and recycling, I would be very interested in seeing some of the art that has come out of RAIR, your work, the artwork. So I don't know if you have time to get back to your computer and share with us some of the sculptures.
So these tours, I never go into the details of the individual projects by showing pictures of them, but they're all on our website. And then all the special projects, all of the past artists and residents, there's documentation of everybody's work except for the current residents and last year's residents. COVID really threw us for a loop.
Of course.
But
so
yeah,
name
they're all
the
there.
website. Give us the URL.
rairphilly.org, RAIRPHILLY.org, and you'll find all of the beautiful projects that artists have done over the years.
Thank you. I will do that. Thank you for the tour.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. If you got to go, I'm not done, but if you wanted to hang loose, I got a whole other boatload. Take care. Peace. I did want to say one other thing about that application process. A lot of people think that because of the work that we do, the proposals are like, it behooves you to align yourself with some sort of environmental, sustainable, or let's just say, you don't have to be an eco artist to make a competitive application. In actuality, a lot of times the people who are really immersed in more sustainably driven practices are folks that, let's just say that the artists who are applying here, we have more impact in terms of educating and influencing and demonstrating to people who are less aware. But by no means do you have to be, thematic in environmental or sustainably driven themes in order to make a competitive application. It's kind of a misconception. Often people think that like you have to have a hard activist bend in order to be an artist who gets accepted here, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So a lot of times we pride ourselves in artists coming in and knowing nothing about environmentalism or sustainable practices, but they leave here changed as a human in terms of how they approach their material consumption and what they think about when it comes to starting projects and how they leave a legacy of their materials and practice. So that's like just to kind of clear that up. But I'm going to dovetail into let's just call it a dream, RAIR 2.0, the next frontier. What I'm walking on right now is it's the property just next to the recycling facility. It's owned by Revolution Recovery, but it's a remediated Superfund site. And for those of you who don't know what a Superfund site is, it is a parcel of land that has experienced environmental disaster from industrial activity and has been contaminated to such a degree it becomes a direct threat to populations in some way, shape, or form. And through the Department of Environmental Protection upwards to the EPA, gets a special designation as a Superfund site. And then the work begins, the long, slow, expensive work of remediation and abatement. So this land was contaminated by a recycler back decades ago, and they were recycling big components of energy companies and utilities, like big transformers from Pico, and all of these, very valuable metals from like transformers were being extracted and then sold at a large profit. But all of the contaminants and fluids and PCBs that were part of those materials were going directly into the ground. And I don't know if you can see from this, but like you might be able to notice that's the Delaware River. And this land was contaminated with all of that stuff leaching into the ground and then leaching into the river. And there's an oil slick coming off the end of this landmass. The Coast Guard saw and then reported it to DEP, went up to the EPA, got the designation. And then millions and millions of dollars and years of work and engineering and planning. The site was, they removed a bunch of soil. They put down concrete caps and biomembranes, put in new clean fill, and engineered a pile wall so anything that's in the soil does not leach into the river. And then they call it remediated. And it goes back to market and somebody can buy it. Revolution Recovery bought it in late 2017, both because they didn't want a neighbor who would be like, they run a dirty business. There's no two ways about it. It's a recycling center. So rather than having like, Joe and Fran with their, business next door always complaining about how dirty their operation is, but also they knew that they would have to expand their company in order to be relevant in the market. And like going back to that commodities market crash, one of the things that they did when I first showed up here, they didn't own any trucks, they didn't own any dumpsters, and they were just having all these haulers come in and bring the waste to them. Now they own like 25 trucks. They got like probably close to 1,000 dumpsters, and they're in the hauling game. So now you can kind of see all of their equipment gets parked here, all of their dumpsters get parked here, but right on this end of the line right here, and then the rest of the field, they're not permitted to deal with this property out here that goes to the river. What is permitted and has already been given right away and is already under design and 5 to 6 years away from being constructed and implemented is the Greenway, which is a bike path that goes up the eastern seaboard. And there's a nonprofit called Riverfront North that's doing all of the design, fundraising, construction, and implementation of the river trail from Allegheny North all the way up to the city limits. And in the next 5 to 6 years, that bike trail is going to come through this field. Now we do, our organization is small. We're very flexible and nimble. It's something that we champion as like very important attributes to the work that we do, being able to pivot and flex and scale up and scale down. But we've always been limited in terms of community engagement. We're a very dangerous site, so we can't really invite the public in very easily because it's a liability. This field and its forthcoming civic amenity is an opportunity for us to meet it, to kind of develop a more meaningful engagement, develop new projects and initiatives that are capitalizing on the space, but also on the underutilized resources we've always had access to, but never really been able to take advantage of because of our limited capacity. The first big project that we did out here was funded by the Pew Center for Arts and Heritage. It was called Sight to Be Seen, also on our website. Also a project where we were able to have the good fortune of collaborating and having a visioning artist in residence by the name of Meryl Latterman Euclid, who I mentioned at the beginning of this tour. The project was really awesome, super dynamic. My former colleague, Lucia Tomei, who's an amazing artist in her own right, you should check out her work. She kind of led that project and a research team to create this research dossier that was really a profile of this site and the legacy of contamination, but going all the way back in time to the time of the Lenape, all the way to current contemporary times, all of the lawsuits and litigation that made this contaminated and how they resulted. It's a really amazing document that now serves as a learning tool or an educational tool for the organization moving forward. The project also invited site respondents, a selection of artists and curators to use this research document to create site responses. And then we generated these 12 site responses from the team that worked on the research and were invited to make these responses. And then that was the project. It was the first, we had this big site opening where we had over 250 people come out and we had the site responses on pedestals staged all throughout that field. And it was the first time we had audiences coming and walking through the site. We fed them food and we had tours. It was really amazing. But it was the first official time we ever actually did programming out there. And it rather than it feeling like the end of a project, the site opening was the last aspect of that grant. It really felt like the beginning. And for us, we've known that like the next stage in our organization's work has a lot to do with that site and the future of what we do in concert with that site. So I'm seeing oh, there's the subtitles. I'm gonna cut through the break room, do a quick run through the studio. And because I did not tell the artists that I was doing this tour, I'm not going to labor them with telling us about their work. I'm just going to show you the studio, and it is full to the gills with their project. And I'll really quick just show it to you. And if they're in there working, I'm just going to kind of be a fly on the wall. But the studio is what you get when you're a standard resident. And you also have access to the studio when you're a Biggie Shorty resident. But let's see, is anybody up there? There might be somebody up here right now. Put on my inside voice. And here we go. Oh, great. Nobody's in here. So this is the studio. To go back to your question, this is kind of, you have your table saw, belt sander, miter saw, toolboxes full of hand tools and measuring and scribes and files and saws. You got a tool crib with like, you know, hammer drills, angle grinders, sawzall, framing gun, got your air compressor. And when you said bending metal, I'm just like, is this going to work for you? Right. You gotta, we do have a welding table. We just don't have a welder in. It's just, it's not a good idea to have a welder up here on the second floor. But you can see these are like, you know, this is all the stuff that Anna Maya and Natalie have been collecting, and they've made this massive loom, and they're going to be weaving all of these materials into this massive loom. They've never made a loom this big. And what you can see, all of this up and down, this is all of the warp, but all of those objects become the weft. Their process is really amazing. They do these workshops to help inform the way that they approach the ordering of these materials in dialogue with individuals, and try how they identify with the stories and the narratives of these objects themselves. And they create these constellations that become the construction of the weft in the loom. I'm doing a terrible job at like trying to summarize that really quickly. If you were to talk to them, we actually have an open studio on April 30th, TBD on what time that is at, but their work is also going to be exhibited at the window gallery at the galleries at Moore later in June, and it'll be there all summer. So, and they're going to be doing workshops as part of that installation at Moore. But just to kind of give you the run of the mill, they've moved the studio around a little bit. But this is a really nice big space. Once it's like all these materials will get cleaned out, so when the next artist shows up, they'll be able to come in, clean slate. Just to kind of give you an idea, this is where we are moving materials in and out all day. There are forklifts available, so we will always be able to get material into the studio. And if it's something that you can carry, we bring it up the stairs. There was a time when we had a studio that was on a first floor, and I gotta say, it was really nice. But going back to that whole like how we would not exist if it wasn't for the support of the host company, Revolution Recovery. They gave us this space. They said, hey, you got it, make it work. So we made it work. That's what we continue to do. We are kind of at the behest of their operations. So if those piles out in the yard are like, say the sort line were to break down or something, and the piles got really big and it was just too dangerous to pick, we then will pack up the artists and we'll go to Delaware and we'll pick in Delaware, right? Depending on what it is. It's like, this place is, you can't rely on this place being the same every day. And that's kind of the special, that's why it's such a special place. It is constantly changing. There are constants you can bank on, but not many, unless you're really good at making art out of 5-gallon buckets, steel studs, and dimensional lumber, you know, and drywall. That's kind of I'm leaving a lot out. There's a ton more that I probably could touch on, but for the sake of the tour, I'm just going to go back into my office, get off this damn phone. Pardon me for one moment. Boom. And now's the time where I say, yo, does anybody have any other questions? Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I'm still soaking it in. Thank you for all of that. I think like what I had in my mind was like, oh, we're just gonna like walk around, but it was really great getting all of that like extra information about the waste stream and like how things are processed.
Yeah, that's like, sorry.
Did you guys like publish anything about the discard study scholars that came? Because I think that's like really, I didn't know that you were doing that.
There's a little zine that we didn't make it for sale. If you were interested, I could just make sure I dropped a couple of them off at your work. Yeah, going back to that, like we're a small shop. We we probably generate a lot more content than is visible through the website and social media. It's just a matter of what can we handle. And like that super fun site, that whole narrative, that whole aspect of what I was talking about really truly is what we look forward to as an opportunity to grow capacity. So work in projects like that has the ability to be disseminated and more widely. We just, we do what we can. Like I was saying, my former colleague Lucia Tomei, she was absolute dynamo at being able to take what the artists are doing and getting it on social media. And these project grants would have publications written into it, and we do an annual review every year, but it's still there's more to be done, always.
Yeah, and I don't know, did we mention Sarah's installation at all?
Oh, Sarah Peoples.
Yeah, Billy helped us out. So Da Vinci has been working with an artist, Sarah Peoples, who lives in South Philly, really close to the gallery, and does a lot of public art. So she has an installation at Palumbo Park. And when we had originally brought her in to do this project, she was looking for more resources of like materials, because there was a very quick turnaround of when she started the installation versus when it got installed. And it was around the same time that we connected to Billy, and Billy very, very generously let Sarah in. So you should all go see her installation because it's great. And thank you a million times, Billy.
Yeah. And I just wanted, just for clarity, this is that feature, or say service provided, is not it's not a public facing part of our organization. We've done a lot of material sourcing for folks over the years. It's a great way to help spread our mission and share what we do with folks. But typically we do not take unsolicited requests for those types of things. I thought it'd be worth mentioning, I've known Sarah Peoples for 2 decades, if not longer, actually. She was a graduate of the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts when my older brother that I collaborate with was a student there. And the other thing is, like, partner institutions, it's like, usually we need to have worked with somebody in order to make a partnership or something like that. But now it's like, obviously now we've worked with Da Vinci, and it's like, we can consider you friends and fam in a way where we can work together, where it's like, we already tested the waters a little bit, because really we're just such a small organization. We just don't have the capacity to fulfill every request. And material sourcing is one of those things that, like, we absolutely look forward to formalizing aspects of it to create new initiatives that reach a broader audience and constituency, and make opportunities available that create impact in a more meaningful way beyond just the open call program. So it's all in the works. It's part of the dream with the super fun site, figuring out how to, really at the end of the day, take advantage of the abundance of opportunity available by the resources that we have at our fingertips by being here. So.
Yeah. Oh, and I want to plug, RAIR has an annual fundraiser at the Crane called Trash Bash every year. So if you'd like to support RAIR, that is a really fun and great way to support them and the work that they're doing for artists.
Thank you for that, Samantha. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. We do a lot of our general operating fundraising by reaching back out to the community that, lucky us, we have a really, special community of folks who support what we do. And we do a big party every year called the Trash Bash, which is not just your typical art auction. People do donate work, but we also have this thing called the Trash Boutique, which is a variety of unauthored art objects that might just be like, a wire basket that was run over by a front end loader, and pop it in a frame, and it's something cute and special, and it's part of the Trash Boutique. But this year we're trying to up the ante a little bit. We might actually do a junk shop. It's always catered. There's no like, live music or anything like that, but a good soundtrack that by the end of the night, once people have had enough drinks in them, people are dancing in the gallery and it's a good time. And it really 100% of the proceeds go back to the artist program and the programming for the forthcoming year. It's a wonderful way for us to bring what we do downtown because we're in Tacony. We are 8 miles north of the city. So if it's, we look forward to being able to connect with people in Center City. And that's the kind of, flagship way that we do it every year. And you can go to our website, you can sign up to be on the newsletter somewhere. I forget exactly where. It's probably just like in the contact or stay in touch. Yeah, you keep an eye out for it. It's always in November, and they'll start being more advertising and press about it come September, October. But it's a good time. You should come out and be part of the party.
Oh, Billy, is there a way, because I like you were saying about that it's hard to get all this like publication and stuff out to people because you are such a small team. Is there a way, like I didn't know about the artists that you currently have in residence. And like I really want to go see their more install now and like how they're going to transform that work into into a weaving. So like, is that something that you email out with the newsletter when they're going to have their opening?
It's going into the newsletter, which our spring newsletter should probably go out in the next week, maybe 2. But the best way to kind of keep up with what we're doing is following us on Instagram. Social media is our number one communication with community. And let's just say there's some room for improvement there, but we're getting there. In terms of it's our best way of communicating what we're doing.
I think it is for everyone now. Like,
yeah, totally.
Oh, did you see my question about the brownfield funds?
You mean the Superfund site?
Yeah.
Did you apply for brownfield funds? No, because it's not a brownfield, it's a super fund. So it's a completely different designation. It's already been remediated. Those programs made available on state and federal funding is they're not necessarily applicable in our situation because all of that remediation has been done already. It's more about for us, how do we develop? How do we come up with programs that we've been in conversation with the Department of Economic and Community Development in Harrisburg, understanding ways that we can, whether it's creating part of that access to the trail through PennDOT or using neighborhood assistance programs to sponsor initiatives that will help subsidize aspects of our programs. That can be, all of this, we're at a point where we're working towards a strategic plan to understand how the totality of what we do wants to be envisioned moving forward. And that's a work in progress. So, but yeah, and just anecdotally, if the metal bank was on the other side of 95 and not brushing up against the Delaware River, it may have been a brownfield. It may have not ever gotten that designation of Superfund site. And unfortunately, I don't think Philly champions this statistic anymore, but they were going neck and neck with Detroit and I think another city for the most square acreage of brownfield for any major US city at one point because of how much industrial wasteland there is. So yeah, it isn't brownfield, is far worse than that because of its designation and its immediate threat to populations. But it's a whole other bar. It's like for us, it's also like that we know what we know in the arts and cultural philanthropic landscape, and now it's a moment to start pivoting and understanding what other ways of diversifying revenue and grant dollars to grow capacity with our organization is available. And that Superfund site, it might not be brownfield funds, but there's other, community impact opportunities that are available through the state and federal programs. It's kind of new to us, and we're still trying to figure that out.
You had me kind of confused now. I don't know the difference between a super fund and a brownfield site then.
So Superfund is just when that land and its contamination becomes an immediate threat to local populations, where a brownfield might have a lot of contamination, but because it's fenced and it's not it's not contaminating the water table, or it's not being aerated and being air pollution. It's more contained and not an immediate threat to local populations. But the way that all of these things work are depending on the thresholds of potential threat, and how it has to do with policy, it has to do with legislation, it has to do with how the industries that made that mess in the first place cleaned it up or didn't clean it up, and what happened afterwards in order to either obscure or cap or whatever. It's always its own case-by-case situation. But the biggest difference between brownfield and Superfund is Superfunds are technically a ton worse because they become a threat to the health and safety of populations nearby.
Okay. I'm thinking of two areas, and I guess one's a brownfield, and I don't know, maybe the other one's a super fund, but Eastwick, has a lot of environmental issues, and I'm thinking that may be a super fund because that's their fear that it'll contaminate. And the area by the Bartram Garden, they used to have the gypsum plant. I guess that would be considered a brownfield.
Yep. Yeah, and which is funny because it's right on the Schuylkill, and you're like, well, I don't know how much toxicity is in the gypsum manufacturing process, but in a weird way, drywall, anecdotally speaking, drywall has a lot of agricultural applications because of gypsum's ability to be a soil amendment, and it can be used to change pH and soil content and stuff like that. So the difference between manufacturing gypsum and the deconstruction of energy company transformers, the toxicity in all of those PCBs that were going into the ground is much more a threat than perhaps what was leaching out in the manufacturing of gypsum. You had a question, Samantha?
Oh, I was waving at Morgan because she has to
Okay.
go. But also,
Can you write the name of that document you were talking about?
If you go onto our website under projects, go to site to be seen, and you'll find it on one of the menus. It's called the dossier, the site to be seen research dossier. And I'm pretty sure you can download it as a PDF. If not, just look at it on the website.
Okay.
Billy, I have a question. Now that we're talking about toxicity, is that a worry, or when artists come into the space, is that something that you talk about of contaminated materials that they're using within their practice while they're there?
Yeah, so, well, I mean, we don't specialize in going into individual studio practices before or after, but obviously can inform that with the knowledge we have of things. But here, there's an orientation safety protocol. The biggest, let's just say occupational hazard is particulate and silica. We do an OSHA certified survey for everybody upon entering into the program. You get test fitted with a particulate respirator. So we're taking, necessary precautions to ensure individual safety while in residence. And then all the things that this is the construction trade. So it's not foolproof. Things slip through the cracks, but asbestos, lead, other general toxic materials are mandated not to be coming through a facility like this. And it's my job when we're picking, if an artist is like, well, what kind of metal is this? I'm like, that is lead. You are not allowed to touch it. And then notifying the foreman so they can deal with it appropriately. part of the dumping process here at Revolution Recovery, and to allow themselves to be accountable for the material coming through, is when a hauler comes through, they're also not 100% foolproof on this, but the equipment operators have a camera. They're taking a picture of that truck and the hauling company and the contents of the dump that was tipped on the floor. So if, and like the big thing here is like people who are dumping tires and they stuff it under all of their other trash, and it's illegal to dump tires in this facility. There's certain materials that, like, if you're caught dumping it, you can be fined because it's mandated by law that you can't be dumping asbestos. That has to be handled, and there's an abatement protocol for contractors to deal with on their own end on site, and it shouldn't be showing up in a dumpster full of trash.
All right, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wanda and David, do you have any other questions?
Well, no, you seem to be knowledgeable about materials. I had a problem with tires. I see people recycle them and make products that I'm like, well, I don't know if I want to use them to grow food or wrap hemp rope around and make table out of it, or a footstool. I mean, and I don't even think I would want to build a house out of them, but I've seen houses built out of them. It just doesn't seem like a very good thing to recycle, except for maybe recycling to make shoes. People make soles with them.
It's so you got me. Basically, I don't know a lot about tires. I know tires are a big problem when it comes to short dumping and people illegally dumping. There's not a lot of outlets, and it's expensive because there's not a lot of reuse value in tires. Sometimes they can be shredded and turned into like ground cover, but yeah. And then going back to like what you said, people build houses. The earth ships in the Southwest are like with the rammed earth in between the tires. That's one way of doing it, but it's like really hard to like do that in an urban setting. I don't know if you saw the garbage warrior guy came to West Philadelphia and was trying to do an earth ship on 40th and Lancaster, and that got shut down by LNI because it doesn't fit within the parameters of building code. So it is a problem. And
well, you can see if they're going up in fight with a fire, like I'm thinking it might be carcinogenic. I'm not sure about tire material.
Yeah.
But I've seen people make shoes out of it though. They recycle, they cut the soles from the tires, and that seems like a good idea. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. If you have the tools and the wherewithal to do that, I've had to cut tires up for projects before, and it's really difficult. It takes a lot of time, and you burn through blades real quick because it's got the wire mesh in there embedded in the rubber, so it becomes pretty difficult to manipulate and to work with. And I've always wondered, like, I've wanted to, because they're so abundant. You've seen artists do it on larger scales because it's such a problem. It's a very easy to acquire material. But yeah, it's a tough one. It's not something that I've been able to wrap my head around. And I've gotten questions from people like, what do you do with tires? And I don't have a good answer.
Yeah, I've seen other artists like make sculptures. Like I'm almost.
I've seen 2 artists to make sculptures out of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Philly City Repair Project that we're also working with, like pretty heavily in the festival. They do. They connect community gardens around the city, and they do like big art projects once a year. And I think that they did a big sculpture last year at the Open Kitchen Sculpture Garden out of tires. And like, I think it's such like a beautiful project and like end result. But yeah, it's like the question of like, how did they cut it down? And also like, I don't know, I always think about the like tire fire under 95 back in like, what is that, like the 80s? Or is that like more recent than that?
There was one in Southwest, I want to say last November.
Yeah.
That was really bad. Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I don't know how like sustainable that is to make art out of it, if it can just like, if someone's like smoking near it or something.
I mean, it's It's funny. I actually have a Post-it note on my computer that says tires because it's one of those things that like, I want to know more about it. And I feel like I'm in a position where I should, it's my responsibility to have a better answer when it comes to people asking me questions about what to do with tires, because they literally fill abandoned lots, and they become a source of, you know, it's part of the short dumping dilemma. And yeah, I don't, but there's not a lot of people who handle them. What's that, Wanda?
Has anybody ever tried to take a tire and do what you do with other products? You know, take the wires out and then remelt the rubber and then reuse it as a tire?
So in big industry, they will recycle tires and they'll add new rubber to a core because they're so expensive. Like you think, look at the tires on those big front end loaders. They cost thousands and thousands of dollars a tire. So there are some, let's just call it not entirely recycling, but mending and adding back onto the construction of those solid tires. But I don't know much about the process of, I'm sure there are people who have thought about it because of it, how big of a problem. I just don't know of any real savvy or interesting solutions or any economically viable solutions that people have come up with, because if they had, I'd probably have heard about them. So I could be, I feel like this is a big blind spot for me because I don't really know much about it. But it is one of those things that I want to learn more about and, you know, wrap my head around.
Well, you need to have like a tire fellow.
Yep. Well, unfortunately, we don't take tires here, so it's not something that we have as part of this waste stream. But I don't have to go very far to find a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the city or somebody, because I remember receiving a postcard where if you gather all the tires and they'll give you, I don't know how much, it was 25 cents or something, I don't know, per tire or whatever. So it's something they must be doing with them. You know what I mean? I just don't know what it is.
I mean, it might, I don't know what they're doing with them. And I don't know of any process that's like, that I've heard of that's like a really good solution for the problem. But yeah, like technically call 311. If you got a bunch of tires at the end of your block, or you'd have a friend who has got a bunch of tires in an abandoned lot across from the home, call 311. But then the question is, how quick is 311 getting back to you, right? So yeah, don't know much about tires.
Don't know much about Sister Rita. Okay.
Anybody else?
Are we done 15 minutes early? Wow, maybe I can go do what I have to do. Okay.
Get an extra 15-minute start on things.
Well, thank you so much, Billy, because yeah, I was right. Now I'm even more obsessed with everything you guys are doing. So thank you.
It is my pleasure.
And also, Wanda and David, if you haven't seen, and anyone who's watching this YouTube live stream / later in time, if you haven't seen Billy and his brother's work before, definitely check it out on Fleischer Ullman's website because it's very good. I don't know if there was already a plug earlier. We are very short staffed, so I've also been gallery sitting.
Yeah.
But
yeah, no, thank you for plugging that. It is I think I just mentioned that we show with them, but that's the place to go to see the work that we've done together over the years.
well, I think it's
Now,
a good.
it's not on your site. You have to go to Fleischer Ullman and you have it on your site also.
You don't see the work that we've done as a artist duo on RAIR's website. They're separate. RAIR's a nonprofit artist residency, and then I have a personal practice, like the practice I do with my brother. As you know, like we do a lot of different types of things. And you know, my brother for the past 5 years has been doing a lot of set design. While I've been, you know, me and colleagues have been building out the nonprofit. So there's a lot of work that we do separate from one another, and then we come together and work on these shows or work on these projects, and then we'll go and do our separate thing, and then we'll come back together. So the most comprehensive repository for that work together is on the Fleischer Ullman website.
Yeah,
And
and
if you go to our
I can see how you could put it on your nonprofit site. You're the founder, right?
yeah, I mean, yeah, but I don't, because it's at least at this point, that's not the main focus with the organization. It is maybe one day, but not at this point in time. Yeah.
Okay, but you can put it under, more about, the founder. It could go under a title like that, because
I think I think it might be. I think it might be like, see more of Billy's work here, blah blah blah. And I'm sure, like, once we get like administrative ends met when it comes to capacity, there's future plans of like being able to be more up to date with all of our alumni, and being able to be up to date with like friends of the organization and partner institutions. And there's just a huge network of people that we've worked with over the years that we would love to support more comprehensively. But again, going back to like the capacity thing, is really the program and our dreams of being able to support that program and the artists we were bringing through has been our main focus. So, but yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Thank you for
sounds like you need a social media person that does just that.
Just
and put links into the other artists, so it'll automatically go to their site, make it easier for a person. Because a more person has to do all that, they're not going to do it.
No, Wanda, that is one of a laundry list of things that we need to do, that we hope to be fulfilling in the near and not too distant future.
Okay.
But thank you.
I mentioned the DeFalla brothers' work because their work is a very good example of taking a lot from the waste stream and making it into a fine art practice. So I think like not only are you guys supporting people who are making this work, but you're also creating it yourself. And I think it is good to uplift your work, Billy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I usually stick to the recycling center because of its, it's a really long-winded conversation through the entire walk in the site. But I mean, to go back and plug it, like one of the things that I did in the early days is this was an opportunity that fed into my personal practice. And I've dreamt about it from, the time I was a student. There's this other thing that I feel important as an artist, but also as a part of a community, is when you do these things, you're supposed to be creating opportunity along the way for others. And that's really at the beginning of all of this, the part of that genesis of what RAIR is that you're not doing this in a silo. You're not going to do it by yourself. Part of my practice is it leans into that as an individual, but to try not and blur and muddy and confuse people, I just stick to that. I also said that this isn't scripted, and I was about to say I stick to the script, but I let people be like, oh, I wonder what they do, and you can find it. It's like, you just Google it, but it's not the flagship program, nor is it like the first thing that I'm telling people about when it comes to educating them and sharing my knowledge of the waste stream with them. So, but yeah, thank you for plugging that, because it's what got me here in the first place.
Yeah. I think that echoes a lot for most of us nonprofit people who have multiple practices.
You got the work, and then you got the work, and then you got the work that you work on, and then the work pays the bill.
Sounds like a song in there somewhere.
Oh, tell me about it. Yeah, I want to make an album that it's love letters to administrative labor, because I think, and it's funny, I actually went back and I like Googled it, and I think there's like 2.5 million professional administrators working and employed in America right now. And I'm like, if I can write this album and get these songs about like PDFs and spreadsheets and all these things, and like kind of dial them into like some kind of like R&B groove, I'd be like, it would go platinum if I could get it out to all the people who want to buy the album and celebrating administrative people who are unsung heroes of all of the arts and culture and beyond. Like, it's just one of those things. Administration is so important. I just happen to not be the best at it. So
Sounds like a pop album, not an R&B.
yeah, you know, maybe. Who knows though? Yeah, I wouldn't be singing it. I'd be going to the artists and being like, hey, do you know an administrator who has had an impact on your career or your life or the work that you do? Let's think about it. So maybe it is a pop album. Who knows? Cool. Yeah. On that note, hey, thank you everybody. I'm gonna go work on my pop album.
Okay, thank you again so much, Billy. Thank you, Wanda and David, for joining us, and everyone else who has seen this and was here earlier. Yeah, I can't wait to continue working with you and everyone
Thank
else.
you.
Everybody,
Bye-bye.
have a great holiday and enjoy the rest of your weekend.